Hi, Transit Unplugged listeners. It's Gary Rosenfeld, CEO of the Memphis Area Transit Authority. Wanted to let you know that I'll be part of a CEO roundtable moderated by Paul at the Think Transit Conference in Nashville in June. I'll be sharing my career journey, trends that I have my eyes on, exciting things that are happening at our agency, and much, much more. You can find more information at trapezegroup.com/thinktransit. Hope to see you at the conference in June.
I'm Paul Comfort. Welcome to a special edition of Transit Unplugged with our first female CEO, Carolyn Flowers, former CEO of Charlotte Area Transit, COO of LA Metro, and acting administrator of the Federal Transit Administration at the end of the Obama administration. Carolyn has a great perspective on things, and on today's show, we take an unusually in-depth look at the FTA, the Federal Transit Administration. She talks about the role and the structure of the FTA, explains the evaluation process FTA uses to award competitive grants, and talks about their new role in safety oversight and helping transit asset management at all of the transit systems across the country. It's one of the most interesting interviews I've conducted yet. She also provides some advice to women in the transit industry. You're going to really enjoy this episode of Transit Unplugged with industry legend Carolyn Flowers.
What does it mean to be a successful public transit agency? What are you doing to lead the way? It's time to learn from the top transit professionals in North America. This is Transit Unplugged with your host, Paul Comfort.
I'm Paul Comfort, your host of Transit Unplugged, and today we're excited to have with us Carolyn Flowers, the former administrator of the Federal Transit Administration, has a long and varied career in the transit industry. We're going to talk today about some of her experiences along the way as a CEO of a transit system, working in the trenches of transit, so to speak, making things happen in LA, and what she's doing now some. So Carolyn, welcome.
Thank you, Paul.
Yeah, great to have you on the program. So, Carolyn, we like to get started sometimes with our guests. Most of the folks we interview are CEOs or former CEOs, and talk about your career. How did you get into transit? People want to know, what's the career path to get to be a CEO? And it's funny, everybody has a different one. I was talking to a guy earlier today who started out at an MPO. And then other people, like Nat, when I interviewed Nat the other day, he started out, in the subways of New York City. How did you start your career?
I started out my career trying to sell a document imaging system into Los Angeles. It wasn't the MTA at that time.
Okay.
A merger was going on between the planning and the operations side. And so I was trying to sell a document imaging system, and the company that I was working for went bankrupt. And I came back and said, I'm sorry, I can't sell you this system. I need to sell myself. I want a job.
Wow, that's great. And so what did they hire you to do?
I actually started out in the civil rights group, doing outreach to businesses so that they could actually have an opportunity to contract with the MTA, LA Metro at that time.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. Yeah, we just had Phil Washington on recently on the program. He talked about his career there and what he's doing now. Boy, LA Metro has really become phenomenal, man. Wow. Yeah. So then what'd you do from there?
So I was at LA Metro for about 16 years. I have an MBA in finance and marketing, and so I had a background in budgeting. And so I eventually ended up as the Deputy Executive Officer of Finance, and for a number of years was responsible for the budget at LA Metro. Wow. But during my career, I did do a year supporting bus operations, and so I became like an advocate inside of the budget department for operations. So,
boy, I bet you they love that because operations always wants more money. So right. Yeah,
and they want someone who understands why they need the money.
That's right.
But I also, moved out of budget and became the CAO, and I was working at, with HR and real estate and IT. But I went over, at the time it was Roger Snowball and John Cato.
Oh, John, my buddy,
Yeah. So John was a deputy. I went over and said, I'd like to work for you. and I ended up becoming the executive officer of operations administration, and having responsibility for the budget, service planning, security. Eventually took on the safety area. And so I was in that position supporting operations, which eventually led me to get a promotion. After John Cato left, Roger Snowball promoted me to Chief Operations Officer. And so I had the responsibility for bus operations.
Wow. COO of LA Metro. And how big was it at the time?
There were 2,600 buses.
Wow. Amazing. That is something. So how long did you stay there, and then what'd you do from there?
I stayed in that position about 2.5 years, and then I left and went to Charlotte to become the CEO of Charlotte Area Transit System.
Yeah, my buddy John Lewis is there now, who came
Yeah.
from the MTA in Baltimore, where I'm from. So tell me about that. What were some of the big things you did there in Charlotte? And
Well, when I first got there, Charlotte faced probably a budget crisis. It was right after the stock market downturn.
Oh, right.
And the plan that they had was predicated on double-digit growth from the sales taxes that they were getting. So there was a 2030 plan to build out 5 new transit lines. And the first segment had opened, and we were facing a crisis of how to fund the next segment. And so had to come in, get the budget basically in line, and then go back to the public and say, we don't have significant funds or sufficient funds to actually deliver the next 4 lines.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so, we were able to go back to the FTA, do a modification on the line that we had in that process, and be able to, cut the last 2 miles off of it so that we could afford it. And it's the Blue Line extension that will be opening on March 16th.
Oh, look at that. Yeah.
And then also...
Are they going to have you back for the
Yeah, I'm
ribbon
gonna go
cutting?
back.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
And then also, the city actually stepped in for funding to support the streetcar project. And so now the second extension of the streetcar is being built.
So at Charlotte, you had a board of directors that you worked with there and all that, or?
No. Charlotte was a very interesting governance structure because the department, the Charlotte Area Transit System was considered a department of the city of Charlotte. However, because of the sales tax initiative, there was a Metropolitan Transit Commission that was comprised of the mayors of all the towns in the county
metropolitan area? Okay, yeah.
in the county. And so they were the governance body for policy. So they made all the decisions about fare. We took our budget to them initially,
Right.
but it was kind of like an appropriator versus an authorizer. So they were more like the authorizer.
Okay.
And the city of Charlotte had to get the budget approved to actually spend the dollars, and all of our procurements had to be approved by the city of Charlotte. And I had a dual reporting relationship between this Metropolitan Transit Council and the city of Charlotte.
The classic 2 bosses scenario. Yeah. Sometimes, though, if you can play that right, you can kind of help move things along better in that role.
Yeah, I was very, I think, lucky when I first got there that Anthony Fox was the mayor of Charlotte.
Right.
and he had a great interest in transit and, gave us a lot of support.
That's wonderful. And so you were there for how long in Charlotte?
5 years.
5 years. That's a long time. And then what'd you do from there?
That's when I went to Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
to work for the Federal Transit Administration.
What was that first job you had there at the FTA?
I was the special assistant to the administrator.
And so you went with Anthony when he went to Washington?
No.
Oh, okay.
He was there probably 1.5 years before I went to Washington.
Gotcha. All right. And so what kind of stuff did you do in that job?
So I was supporting Teresa McMillan, who was
Right.
the acting administrator at that time.
I remember her. Yeah, she was great.
Yeah, so I ended up having had the operations background, Therese used me a lot to go to properties that had some issues or some challenges. I visited Detroit, Puerto Rico.
Oh, wow. Yeah, yeah.
So,
And tried to help them kind of get turned around?
yeah.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, the Atlanta streetcar.
Okay.
Yeah.
But then you ended up becoming the acting administrator.
Right.
So was that when she left, or?
Yes, after she left, I became the acting administrator, and our big challenge at that time was the safety oversight of Washington Metro.
Oh, right. Yeah, yeah. What a job. Paul's still working with that one. I've actually interviewed him in a week or two.
Yeah. Great guy. I admire him.
Yeah, I'm telling you. Got probably one of the toughest jobs in Washington, D.C., you know.
Probably in the nation.
Yeah, that's right. So, wow, that's amazing. So your story is really wonderful that you were able to kind of, you rose through the ranks and became the top position in our industry. That's amazing. What advice would you have for women in our industry? I mean, we're here today, you and I are at an APTA Business Board of Governors meeting, and, you know, I don't think it's wrong to say, but I look around, it's mostly men. And so tell us about what kind of advice would you give to women who want to move up in our transit industry?
Well, I think one of the things that women need to ensure is that they avail themselves of mentors in the industry, and also networking. I think those are key. You know, I came through the APTA Leadership Program, which offered a great opportunity to, you know, learn about the industry, network in the industry, and get information. And also, I came through the Executive Development Program, and learned a lot from, like Barbara Gannon and Bob Prince, and I think I learned some key things there in terms of relationships, having contacts in the industry, and having mentors. And so, I had an opportunity to have several mentors, that helped me be guided through my career here in the industry. And I think that was something that was significant. And also being involved in Women's Transportation Seminar, WTS.
Okay, yes, that's a good one, yeah.
So those, just being, out there in the industry, having other women, but also having men, to help you and guide you and to advise you.
Well, I mean, you're a good example of the fact that when you apply yourself and you make the right connections, you can make it to the very top. My friend Jane Williams is kind of in a similar role that you were in now. She's the acting administrator there as well. She worked with me at MDOT. So you were there till the end of the Obama administration?
Yes.
Is that right? And then what'd you do after that?
Okay, I took a nice vacation, 2 months off.
There you go. That's nice. You need that every now and then in your career, yeah.
I spent time with my mother.
Okay.
And then I started to work for AECOM last March.
And what do you do with them?
This is the market sector leader for the Americas, transit market sector leader for the Americas. And so responsible for business development, client relationships, and major pursuits and sales for our transit line of the business.
So here at the APTA business side of the house, where I'm new too to this side of the house, there's a lot of engineering companies. And I think that folks who aren't involved in that side of the industry, if you're not involved in the construction, the capital development side, you may not even be aware of what these big engineering companies do. Talk from a broad perspective, what role these private sector companies play in the development of our transit systems and our transit industry?
Well, the company that I work for, AECOM, does design, planning, construction, and in cases now they also do integrated delivery. So they also offer the capital financing side, as well as AECOM is the operator and maintainer of the Hudson-Bergen line. So if
they're doing everything.
Yeah. So if you're looking at the whole DBFOM concept.
Right. Design, build, operate, finance, and
maintain.
Maintain, yes,
right?
okay, yeah.
And maintain. I'm working for a company that actually has that ability. It's a global company with about 95,000 employees around the world.
And in that market sector, there are companies like Jacobs and Parsons and.
Don't mention those names.
Okay, yeah. Well, it's just looking at the whole big industry.
I know, yeah.
So these big. I just wanted to point out that these big companies are really partners
Yes.
with our transit agencies to help really develop brand new capital projects. I know that in Baltimore and in Maryland, where I came from, we were building what's called the Purple Line, which is a big light rail project, and we went through a big procurement process to put together a concessionaire, which had dozens of companies involved in it.
And AECOM was involved in that one.
Yeah.
Yes.
So these companies are critical. Private sector involvement, it really is critical for big capital improvements. Most transit agencies don't have the staff or the expertise to do that themselves. And to be honest with you, there's a big role for women in that side of the business as well, I think. I know that a lot of the engineering type staff that we had at the MTA and with our consultants were, this is a great opportunity for them in the industry. So that's wonderful. Talk to us about the role of the FTA. We haven't really talked about that on my show yet. What does the FTA do besides just give out money?
Well, that is probably the largest program that FTA has been known for, the Capital Investment Grant Program, where they provide the federal match for construction projects, and it's been up to 50%. But FTA also gives out discretionary grants, and they give out formula grants. So formula grants, basically every transit agency is getting some formula funds, and it's for rural as well as urban.
So that's like the 5307 funds,
yes.
which go to big urban areas, and 5311.
Yes.
Yeah.
And as well as discretionary grants, bus and bus facilities. FTA is a reviewer in the Tiger grant process, in the Infra grant process, and was involved also when Secretary Fox was doing smart cities and doing the reviews there. But then there's other, transit-oriented development grants that FTA is involved in, and research grants. The Mobility Sandbox, which is now, leading to a lot of demonstration projects that are supporting mobility on demand and microtransit.
Yes, those are awesome new innovations. So, in that, when you apply for those competitive, go ahead. You have something else you're going to say?
And the other really important area is safety oversight.
Right. We'll talk about that in just a minute. That's a big role.
Okay.
So, but in these competitive grants like Tiger grants, so we got one in Baltimore when I was there called North Avenue Rising, and it was focused on. It was actually the Obama administration that gave it to us. It was focused on the area where the uprisings were in Baltimore, and making transit improvements there. But I know that most people that get them seem like they have to hire like these insider groups, consultants or lawyers who can kind of work it. Do you need that if you're a transit agency, or can you just win based on the substance of your proposal?
You can win on the substance of your proposal.
Okay.
And I think there's a lot of key factors. You need support, of course. Congressional support always helps.
Yes, so if you had your congressman or your senator behind it.
Right. Getting letters of support, that helps. But you have to have a project that is of significance in terms of addressing, I guess, whatever the current priorities of that administration is. This past administration focused on ladders of opportunity.
Okay.
And so your grant definitely addressed the issues around ladders of opportunity, for connectivity improvements, for mobility improvements, and especially, focusing on the urban core areas.
Now, in the selection process for those grants, is that something that's done by the administrator of FTA along with like a group that studies it, or is that higher up? Does it have to go up to the secretary's office, those kind of things?
There's a senior management team that comes in with recommendations that reviews it with the secretary.
So the secretary ends up making the final decision usually?
Yes.
Okay, very good. And is that budgeted in Congress's budget? Like, this is how much you can use for these discretionary grants?
Yeah. So under MAP 21, which is the, it's FAST Act.
That's right, yeah. But MAP 21, we still all, I'm still talking about iced tea, you know?
So under FAST,
right.
Under the FAST Act, there are there are authorization levels that have been put out for different programs. Like Tiger, it was $500 million.
Okay.
And then on an annual basis in the budget, the requests go in, and then Congress appropriates it whenever they do a budget.
Yeah, what is all this continuing resolution stuff, Actually, we should talk about that for a second. I know I've been working with APTA on a paper to address the importance of kind of steady, long-term federal funding and not just relying on these competitive grants, but also, so talk about that and the importance of that, you think, now that especially you're in the private sector. Isn't that critical to have those kind of loan guarantees and all that kind of stuff in place?
One of the critical issues that face transit agencies is stability of funding, and then there's a significant backlog. And you see agencies like WMATA that are facing the lack of dependable and reliable funding stream, and then we look at. Overall, there's about a $90 billion backlog in state of good repair in this country, and it continues to grow because most transit agencies don't have sufficient funding anymore to do their state of good repair and operate on a daily basis. So they really are just being pulled like taffy to try to deliver their services.
Right. So these competitive grants, like you mentioned, they are focusing like on some new, brand new, cool service that you're going to do. We know a lot of politicians like to go to the ribbon cuttings, and I know some of it goes for infrastructure too. But these long-term formula grants that are capital funded, they're the ones really that a lot of agencies use to fund their state of good repair. Is that right?
Right.
Yeah. And it's as we were talking about Paul Wiedefeld, and it's not the sexy new service, but I'm telling you what, you'll make the headlines if you don't have the state of good repair, right?
Exactly, right.
Now, was the MAP 21 requirements that require everyone to go out and kind of do this analysis of all their assets, was that done while you were in there?
Yeah, the transit asset management.
Yeah, talk about that a little. That's very big in the country.
Right now, there is a requirement from FTA that the transit agencies do these transit asset management plans, and there's a timeline that it has to be done by, and don't ask me now what it is.
Yeah, right. Well, it's different, I think, for
yeah.
different size agencies,
Right, mm-hmm.
Right, yeah.
And so that is addressing the whole issue behind state of good repair, because you have to understand, the state of your assets, what is the life cycle, and what is your replacement cycle, and how are you going to prioritize those? So, doing this whole inventory assessment and evaluation is supposed to lead you to coming up with the priorities for your capital program, and and being able to have basically the documentation for your decisions behind your capital program.
Right. When I was at Baltimore, the staff came to me and kind of briefed me on this. I normally don't like mandates from Washington, but I got to tell you, I was happy for this. It kind of forced us to evaluate. It's a physical evaluation where you actually go out and physically evaluate, your track, your buildings, your buses, your rail cars. It's a wonderful thing. And then does FTA use your grading to kind of score and decide, if they're going to get you capital grants for making those improvements?
I don't know if that level has come in yet, but
I got you.
But what they want that the agencies to be cognizant of is the state of their assets, and at this time, I don't think it's been tied to FTA actually deciding who gets how much.
Okay, I got you. Yeah, but I know internally for us, it helped us prioritize what we're going to do with our capital dollars.
Yeah, and it's also not just driving your capital program. It also affects your safety of your system.
That's right. And so let's use that as a segue to talk about the safety role of FTA.
So FTA was given the responsibility for safety oversight under MAP 21.
Right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So right now, states are going through a process where they're getting certified for their safety oversight program. So the state safety oversight agencies over rail, have to be, their plans have to be in place, I think, by next year, by 2019. And so So FTA actually had to step into the role of a state oversight agency in Washington, D.C. over Washington Metro because of the deficiency of the oversight agency that was multi-state.
Yeah, the tri-state one.
Yeah, the tri-state.
Yeah.
And it was a lot of governance issues and in having that
Right.
You know,
to have
having
the
that
authority
structure.
to
Yes.
kind of have teeth behind what they
Right,
said. Yeah.
right. And so FTA took over that responsibility.
And you were there when that happened?
Yes.
So did you get really involved with that?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. God bless you.
And God bless Congress too.
Yeah. So now that is a kind of a new mandate for FTA, all these states have to pass this, or the transit agencies have to pass it. So there's some outside third-party agency that oversees the safety. Is that how it works?
That agency is actually FTA, who is overseeing the state
These
safety.
SSOs?
Yes, but then the SSOs in every state has to, be certified that they are not receiving funds from the agency that they're overseeing.
Ah.
Yeah, because that's
Yeah, they don't want it because they won't bite the hand that feeds them, so to speak.
Right.
Yeah.
And so they have to have, the financial.
Okay, separate
indep-
funding streams?
Yes,
Uh-huh.
financial independence and be certified. Their programs have to be certified by FTA.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. So is there a whole office set up at FTA now for that?
Yes. Mhm.
Yep. So FTA does funding. They help fund new programs. They do safety oversight. What other kind of things does the Federal Transit Administration do?
They do compliance reviews of, procurement,
Civil rights?
civil rights, compliance, civil rights. When a major project is being done, project management oversight is done of the construction program. And so those are, I think, the main responsibilities.
When I was in Baltimore, we had quarterly meetings with our FTA staff who come from Philadelphia, and we had a regional administrator. So maybe you could describe for folks, again, I think this is kind of uncharted territory. A lot of people don't understand this unless they're at the C-suite level, that FTA is broken up into regions and their regional administrators. Talk about that structure. Yeah.
FTA isn't really that large of an agency, but there are 10 regional offices around the country. And the regional administrators are the ones who basically have, the direct interface and contact with the transit agencies, and they're assigned a number of states that they're responsible for. And so there are 10 regions in the country. And so those regional administrators report up to headquarters in Washington, D.C. And basically they're responsible for the compliance, oversight, and grant management of the FTA assets and policies.
I think that's a wonderful, actually, way to have it set up because they're closer to what's really happening. I know that when the team would come down, there would usually be 7 or 8 people from the FTA once a quarter, and we would have to explain to them every project that we're working on, the status of it. They would ask questions ahead of time at the meeting. I mean, it was real compliance. It wasn't just like, pencil checking to push, to say, okay, it's okay. So that's great. You're maintaining the timeliness and the compliance of the projects.
Yes, and also the fiduciary responsibility for the dollars that are those are taxpayer dollars that are being spent.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, when you're in Washington, as the top person in the country running the Federal Transit Administration, is there a lot of politics involved, or are you kind of sheltered from that and it handles at the Secretary's office, or?
No, you get contacted directly by congressional members.
Who are, and what do they say? Fund my project, that kind of
they're
stuff?
asking questions about, sometimes they're asking questions about the regulations, new regulations coming out, or they're asking questions about the budget, or they're asking questions about the status of projects that are in the pipeline.
And do you have like people from FTA that work the Hill? So you have like
Yes.
internal lobbyists
Yes.
who stay on top of stuff that affects you?
Yeah.
That's good. And how often did you meet with the secretary when you were there as the administrator? Was it like a weekly staff meeting, or how does that work?
I actually met with him periodically, but I met with the deputy secretary every week.
Okay, so the deputy kind of made, and did they do that with the Federal Railroad Administration and all those guys too, Federal Aviation, you think?
No, FTA had a special place because of our oversight of Washington Metro, and it was constantly in the headlines.
I gotcha.
And there was interest all the way up to the White House about what was going on there.
I'm sure there was. That's interesting. Yeah. So last big question is which do you prefer, if you could say you have a preference? I mean, you spent a long time in the public sector doing jobs. What was your favorite job you had, and what's the differences between the public and the private sector now that you're in the private?
Yeah. The public sector, you have responsibility for delivering service on a daily basis, and that's your focus. Your customers are the focus, and your service, reliability, safety. On the private side, you have the profit.
Right.
You're profit driven, and you want to provide good projects and deliver good projects and do quality work for the client that is delivering the service.
Right.
But it is profit driven.
Right.
Yeah. So you make a decision based on, what you can earn.
Right. Yeah. I've used this analogy a couple times in speeches. Is that I think the best public sector managers are using the head of the private sector, meaning all the latest technology and management tools, but have the heart of the public sector. Whereas you're not doing it for profit, you're doing it actually to help people. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting to have both sides of the fence, isn't it? To kind of learn both sides of that.
Yes, I feel like I've done the full circle now.
Yeah, you have. Yeah, come
Yeah.
full circle, the circle
Yeah.
of life. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Well, great. Is there any other? What's on the horizon for Carolyn Flowers? What do you see coming for you for the next 5 to 10 years?
Retirement. But continuing to work in a place that is fulfilling me, and that I feel that I have purpose. For me, after working in the public sector, very focused on the need for infrastructure, and being in a place where I'm still being able to contribute to serving the public and making sure that the public has quality service and reliable service is really, I think, a driver for me.
That's good. I lied. I'm going to ask you one more question because I always like to end up on trends,
Mm-hmm.
transit trends and all. So you've run the gamut, as you mentioned, and had a great career in transit and are still a big player in it. Are you optimistic about public transit? Do you see the role of public transit changing to become more mobility based and pulling in private sector?
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about that. What you see coming?
Well, I see, and Nat Ford is. Who is the chair of APTA this year, has made me co-chair of the mobility.
Oh, good.
His mobility initiative.
Yeah.
And so, so I'm looking at mobility as a service, and that the role of transit providers will be more of aggregators. Yes, you still have the base, your base service and your core services there, but looking at what is changing in the market and looking at more and more of these transit network companies and other services, microtransit services coming in. What the customer is looking for is mobility and connectivity. And what can the transit agency provide? They can provide the way for them to complete that trip, in a seamless manner. And so I do see a role for transit agencies in the future as aggregators, and that they ensure that when a customer comes in, they said, I want to get from point A to point B. They give them the choices, the options, and one place to shop.
That's wonderful. I agree with you 100%. I was down in Dallas recently, in DART, and that's what they're working on. They're working on the next app. It'll have 10 different services
My
on it.
co-chair is Gary Thomas.
Oh, there you go. Well, Gary's right on it.
Yeah.
I think it was kind of this Helsinki, Finland approach where they had this app.
Yeah.
What I'm encouraging transit agencies to do is see if they can negotiate, and not just people have to pay a la carte for each service, but even having a monthly subscription where you could have a certain level of zip car, a certain level of Lyft, number of trips. Do you see that coming for America, something like that?
I think it's a while off, but
Okay.
but the whole concept of an aggregator would allow you to do that.
Right.
Yeah.
That's good. Very good. Well, it's great to get a view from the top. Somebody who's been to the top and see the future. And thank you so much. I mean, you're really a legend in this business. I really appreciate you,
thank you.
you being with us on this program. And wish you the very best in the future.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
You've been listening to Transit Unplugged, powered by Trapeze Group. To stay up to date, subscribe on iTunes or Google Play, or join the conversation at transitunplugged.com. Thanks for listening.